Good morning, Kyle. How are you doing today?
Good. Good morning, Paul. How are you?
I'm well, thanks. So we're going to talk today about gap assessments, CMMC Gap Assessments, which is a fairly popular service that we perform for clients, but we get a lot of questions about it. So I thought it would be good if we talk and explain a little bit about that here in this video today.
Yep, absolutely.
Super. So Kyle, maybe just a quick overview. What is a CMMC Gap Assessment?
Okay, yeah, gap assessment is an assessment of where you are today based on the CMMC 2.0. And most likely you're going for the CMMC level 2 because that's the one that requires the gap assessment. It will help you determine how many practices that you have implemented, because at the end result is that you need to meet the CMMC 2.0 level 2 110 controls, which is based on the NIST 800-171. So it will help you identify how many controls you have, how many have implemented, and how many controls you need to implement. If you have partially implemented controls, we'll document what else you need to do to complete the 110 controls.
So essentially, those gaps, if you will, are areas of non-compliance, right, with a particular control or with a particular assessment objective. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yep.
Okay. And maybe this would be a good place to talk about the difference, let's say, between a gap assessment and a readiness assessment. So they seem like they're similar, but maybe if you could explain what the difference is, that would be helpful.
Yep. So some people call it differently. We call it gap assessment in the beginning. So you know how much work is going to take you to get to 110. Readiness assessment is something that we'll do when you think you're pretty much ready for the actual assessment. Then we will do a readiness assessment. These are the assessment to see if you are truly ready for the final assessment with the C3PAO, the Certified Third-Party Assessment Organization, right? They will hire a third party to do the assessment on you, and we'll do the readiness assessment. Readiness assessment will consist of reviewing of your policies, procedures, and the system security plan, the SSP. If you have any plan of action or milestone, the POAM, any gaps, you still can get your CMMC certification, right? But we're going to review that as well. So these are the documentation we'll go into review. And also, we're going to treat this like a mock assessment.
So it's not clear to me, do people look to get a gap assessment early on in their process to figure out where they're at with their compliance program, and a readiness assessment later on when they think they're ready? I think that would be helpful to know.
Yes, you want to start as early as possible to get a gap assessment, because you really want to know where you are so you can plan out your roadmap. If you have many practices that still need to be implemented, you can build yourself a roadmap. You want to do that as early as possible. And readiness assessment is towards the end of your preparation, and that you want to get a readiness assessment before the real assessment.
Okay, that's good to know. So I think another helpful question to know the answer to would be, how long do they take? So if a client were to come to us and say, yeah, we're interested in a gap assessment, CMMC Gap Assessment, Gap Analysis, what should they be expecting for the duration of that engagement?
For the gap assessment, it really depends on the complexity of your IT environment. Okay. Also, the sites, how many sites do you have? Yeah, so some people have more physical sites and multiple cage code, that will take a while. Okay. So if you have a fairly simple IT environments, and it's not too complex, right? And only have one site, we can do it as quickly as 1 month or 4 weeks. But if it's more complex, obviously we'll have to do an estimate.
Okay. So that would be more on a case-by-case basis.
Exactly.
Okay, no, and that makes sense. What does the process look like? Maybe that would be helpful to know. So a client hires us to do a gap assessment, CMMC Gap Analysis. What does that process look like? What does the consultation look like? Do we need to go on site? Can we do them all remotely, et cetera? Maybe you could just talk about that a little bit, please.
Yeah, we can do this virtually. We don't have to go on site unless there's a lot of physical security involved. And then if we want to take a look at more on the physical security parts, then we might go on site. But otherwise, virtual assessment is what we normally do.
Okay, that's good. So Kyle, what does the process look like of conducting a CMMC gap assessment?
Yeah, we will start with scheduling 2 or 3 Zoom calls to go through the process. If the process takes a little bit longer, we'll schedule more, but we will start with 2 or 3 Zoom calls to go through the scope, the practices that you have.
Okay, good. And who needs to be present on these calls from the client perspective? Is it just the IT folks, or who do you recommend?
Initially, as we go through the scope, I will say it's better to involve all the people that touch CUI, all the department heads that have the people that touching CUI, because IT may not know some of the business processes of the reason, some of the purpose, some of the processes from the other non-IT departments. So it will be good for the business, some of the HR, if the purchasing, engineering to get involved as well.
Right. Certainly because of, well, especially with manufacturing, right?
Exactly.
Manufacturers have all this operational technology that, and IoT of things as well, right? IIoT of things that also becomes or can become part of the scope of CUI, depending on their manufacturing processes, right?
Yes.
Right. Okay. Okay. So in terms of where we begin with these, Kyle, I think you talked about scoping CUI, and it seems like it's pretty important to this process overall, right, to get the scope right. So maybe we could just talk a little bit about that.
Right. It is very important as we are going through the gap assessment. We want to make sure that the company have the right scope. And the company might already define the scope, but we will verify the scope. And we will walk through the data flow and the data lifecycle for the CUI. Right. So we'll go through the CUI. How does the CUI get into the company's environment, the input and creation? Then we'll go through the storage of the CUI, where is stored, who actually managed the storage, and how is actually stored, the usage, the people, process, technology, the application that touches the CUI, the sharing of the CUI, the vendors, the subcontractors, the prime contractors, how do you share that CUI, who do you share with? And also the archiving and the backup of the CUI, where is it stored, how do you do the backup? And also the end of the life cycle, the last step is how do you destroy that data, right? How do you destroy it, and who actually responsible for destroying, do you outsource it? So once we go through the life cycle, we will verify to see if you have the right scope. That's where we start. And if the scope is a little bit different from the company have defined previously, we will adjust and make sure that company have the right scope.
Right. Okay. No, that's good to know. So we begin with scope. You get the scope. Well, first of all, I guess we should back up and say we determine that it's not COTS, because that's part of this process as well. But assuming that this particular client is not a COTS vendor and doesn't qualify for a COTS exemption, we go through the CUI data lifecycle. We scope CUI. What comes next then? So how do we then go and proceed after we have the scope clearly defined?
Right. So once we go through the scope, the data lifecycle, one of the reasons is to define the systems and the applications that are in scope, right? The assets that are in scope. So once we understand these assets, the COI assets and the security protection assets like the firewall, VPN, what kind of security technologies they have, then we will be able to more clearly, more precisely ask the right question, how the practices apply to these type of assets, right? So we will be able to walk through the 110 practices. We'll go through each one of them based on the assets that they are in scope. So we don't have to talk about all the assets that are not in scope. And we will go through, for example, access control. How do you access the assets that are in scope?
Okay. And so with some of our clients who come to us, they use cloud services. How do cloud services affect or impact a CMMC gap assessment?
Yeah. So as we go through the gap assessment, we're going to define the asset inventory, right? Mm-hmm. We're going to go through your CY assets, and we're going to list out your assets that are on-prem and also in the cloud. So if you have multiple environments, we're going to take that into consideration, and there are going to be some checks. If you are using cloud, we might look for some FedRAMP certification, for example, right? So there are certain criteria when you are using the third-party, the cloud services. We're going to do some verification or some of the requirements, some of the cybersecurity requirements, the encryption and requirements, right? That should be applied to some of these vendors.
Okay. So Kyle, we talked a little bit about the cloud. What about client company MSPs? How does that factor into the gap assessment or the overall compliance program?
Yeah, so if your IT is outsourced to some of the managed service providers, then during the interview, we will need to have them involved because they are more familiar with your IT environments. And in terms of some of the configurations, specific configuration questions, change management, how they manage some of the network security, parameter security, even the cloud, if they manage the cloud for you, they will have the answer. So we will need them to get involved during the interview process.
Okay. Now I know a little bit earlier we talked about complexity affecting the cost and the time duration of a CMMC gap assessment. But what are some of the other factors there? If we were to just elaborate a little bit about those and spell those out, what would be the factors that would impact both the duration and the cost of a gap assessment?
Number of systems involved could be many different directions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Kyle, some clients are using SaaS, software as a service, or cloud service providers. How does that impact the gap assessment or really their overall compliance program with NIST 800-171 and CMMC?
Right. So the cloud service providers, especially, we will look into the shared responsibility metrics. Most likely, you will need to request a copy if you don't already have one. And during our gap assessment, we're going to identify what responsibility belong to the cloud service provider or the third-party service that you use, and what responsibilities belong to you. Some of them are going to be shared, right? There are going to be some portion are going to be taken care by the service provider and some by you. Right, so we're going to go through the shared responsibility metrics and identify what your responsibilities are and see if you fulfill those responsibilities. And also we are going to do a quick verification to see that based on the implementation, does it actually make sense? The shared responsibility metrics, service providers say they are going to be responsible for those services. Does it actually make sense? We're going to take a look at that as well.
Okay. Kyle, do either the gap assessment, the CMMC gap assessment, or the CMMC readiness assessment, do those include an evaluation of the adequacy of the supporting documentation that clients need to be able to demonstrate that they're in compliance with a particular practice?
Yes, yep, absolutely. So we will look at all the supporting documents, that meaning policies, procedures, any of the SOP, the standard operating procedures, whatever document that you have, acceptable use policy, incident response plan, whatever the plan, the policy procedures that you have, and we will be able to review and to see if they are sufficient, and if there are any gaps, we'll identify them.
Okay, good. What does the deliverable package look like? What should a client be expecting with that?
Yeah, the deliverables will give you the system security plan at the high level, understanding where you are right now. We're going to give you a poem, the gaps, and we're going to help you identify the priority, give you the roadmap, how you should approach remediating these gaps, right? We'll give you a priority based on the risk as well as the effort. So low risk, low effort first, right? Mm-hmm. Because then you can get rid of a lot of the easy task, who's your score. Mm-hmm. And we will give you the SPRS, the score that you are going to submit based on the DFAR 252-204-7020, right? You are required to submit a score to SPRS, so we will give you that score. And if you have any questions about submitting the SPRS, we'll help you. But this eventually is our deliverable for our gap assessment service.
Okay, good. Okay, so Kyle, to wrap it up, KLC Consulting, we are a cleared candidate C3PAO firm. We have provisional assessors and provisional instructors, soon to be. This is our niche specialty, is providing compliance solutions for NIST 800-171 and CMMC. And in fact, we specialize in providing the most affordable solutions that are available today. So if you have any questions about gap assessments or readiness assessments, or any questions at all about CMMC and NIST 800-171, I highly encourage that you contact us. We'll have our Contact Us page link at the end of this video, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you very much, Kyle.
Thank you.